He did say to me once, "I wish I wasn't half Asian." I never realized that he was so racist.
Welcome to Watch Mojo. And today, we're looking at individuals who are outside of law enforcement and the public eye before their report of a potential crime went ignored.
I just thought it was like, you know, when you're angry, you write stuff. I write when I'm angry and depressed. I figured it was just stuff he was writing when he was really just ticked off.
Harry Markopolos.
They were paid so much to look the other way. Those feeder funds were incentivized not to ask the questions, to be willfully blind, if you will, and not get too intrusive into the Madoff scheme.
Throughout the 1990s, wealth manager Bernie Madoff gained a glowing reputation in finance. His numbers were so impressive by the end of the decade that they concerned a profiler for Rampart Investment Management. Harry Markopolos noted that Madoff's returns were unrealistically consistent for legal methods and market activity. He then delivered a report to the SEC in 2000, but no action was taken. He submitted 2 more futile reports in 2001 and 2005 and left Rampart amid disillusionment.
Who else figured this out besides you?
I would say that hundreds of people suspected something was amiss with the Madoff operation. If you look at who the victims were not, you'll notice that the major firms on Wall Street had no money with Mr. Madoff.
Finally, in 2008, Madoff's own sons exposed the largest Ponzi scheme in history. The world finally listened to Markopolos after that, and his personal experience with the failures of oversight in the financial industry. He continues to expose white-collar crime as a now respected forensic accountant.
Nothing about this case was ever believable. It was always the Twilight Zone, and that's how you knew it was the Madoff case, because every time you saw something, it never made sense.
Omar Mateen's co-workers.
Gilroy says he twice reported the threats to his supervisor with the security company G4S, but nothing was done. So Gilroy decided to quit. He went so far as to write a resignation letter detailing his thoughts about Omar Mateen.
Many rumors surround the person responsible for 49 deaths at Orlando's Pulse nightclub on June 12, 2016. But those who worked alongside bodyguard Omar Mateen knew enough to try to prevent this. In 2013, multiple G4S Secure Solutions employees told police about his sympathies for Islamic extremist groups.
Well, the complaint was oral. I told my supervisor. But they seemed to not want to care and made the issue my issue.
Daniel Gilroy also complained to supervisors that Mateen's bigotry, misogyny, and anger created a hostile work environment. This prompted 2 FBI investigations that briefly placed Mateen on a terrorist watch list. 2 years after it was determined that he posed no credible threat, he was able to purchase the firearms used at Pulse. If nothing else, the tragedy represents the limits and how far law enforcement and gun regulation determine dangerous people.
At 2:30 a.m., Mateen calls 911, hanging up twice before a dispatcher calls him back. He then pledges his allegiance to ISIS.
And he was telling them, stop bombing ISIS.
Stop bombing ISIS in Syria.
Sean Hodgson.
I mean, you say that they're talking about you behind your back, but you actually hear them saying these things?
Yeah,
or
I'm hearing them, yeah.
Okay. Well, so why would they tell us that they weren't saying those things?
I don't know.
U.S. Army reservists Robert Card and Sean Hodgson were best friends for 2 decades. So the latter was able to intimately witness Card's psychological decline during his 8 years as a grenade instructor. It's believed that this intense environment caused gradual traumatic brain injury. Months of family concerns and hostile acts in 2023 led to limits on Card's authorizations. In September, Hodgson asked his training facility supervisors to change the Sergeant First Class's passcode for fear of a mass shooting.
He was increasingly getting worse and more angry every day.
And in October, Card killed 18 people at a bowling alley in Lewiston, Maine, before taking his own life. Hodgson broke down during the independent inquiry, devastated that his warnings about his friend weren't taken seriously enough.
I knew he was going to do something bad because he was deteriorating in his mental health and he refused to get help.
Salman Abedi's peers.
The company which employed them, Shosek, has been heavily criticised. Failings include inadequacies in its training. It says it's learned lessons and is considering today's criticisms.
In 2014, MI5 launched an investigation into Soham and Abedi based on multiple tips on a counterterrorism hotline. Though the accusers' identities are confidential, they included peers from college and Manchester's Muslim community. There was also concern about the Abedi family's pro-Islamist views and combat in their native Libya. Nonetheless, British intelligence closed the inquiry without sharing information with local law enforcement.
There is still too much that we don't know about whether this terrorist was acting alone, whether he had accomplices, and whether he was part of a wider network, and whether there are others who had access to the same kind of explosives.
On May 22, 2017, Abedi died during a bombing attack at Manchester Arena that he planned with his brother. It would be another 3 years before an extensive public inquiry was launched. MI5 then issued a formal apology for failing to fully investigate a whole community's credible concerns.
Even if conflicts do end in Iraq and Syria, and that's a big if, there may always be those who are attracted to twisted, dangerous ideologies.
Chin Rodger.
Did you inform anyone, either at the college or the parents of his roommates, that he had mental problems?
I didn't see any reason to, because as far as I was concerned, he wasn't a threat to himself or anybody else.
The lonely 22-year-old Elliot Rogers espoused troubling views on women in a series of YouTube videos uploaded in April of 2014. His mother Chin's concern about this resulted in a series of reports that led to a wellness check by police. Elliot convinced the visitors and Chin that he was simply venting about the high-pressure social culture of Isla Vista, California. Shortly thereafter, he took his own life along with 6 others in a killing spree.
I'm 22 years old and I'm still a virgin.
We now know Roger's family contacted police only weeks earlier, concerned about his increasingly disturbing online rants. Sheriff's deputies went to his apartment.
The video, manifesto, and autobiographical manuscript he left behind would become highly influential in sometimes violent incel culture. Chin would eventually become an activist herself in order to help parents recognize the seriousness of their children's mental health and beliefs.
I was meant to have a meeting in London, and he wanted to know the dates.
Why?
He wanted me out of town so that he could come and murder his brother and Samaya.
Dr. Lynne Fenton.
Well, he was extremely anxious. And very awkward, sort of beyond just a smart and nerdy guy, but moved kind of awkwardly, almost robotically sometimes.
University of Colorado student James Holmes started seeing the campus psychiatrist in March of 2012. Dr. Lynne Fenton was disturbed by the patient's persistent violent fantasies, but they weren't specific enough for her to report him as an imminent threat. She eventually violated doctor-patient confidentiality to share information with Holmes's mother and campus police after the patient announced his plans to drop out of school. Fenton herself was reluctant to approve further psychiatric evaluation.
We know that young folks are struggling more than ever with mental health, so that may be a factor, and no doubt the easy access to lethal means.
Shortly after the report blew over, Holmes committed a mass shooting at a movie theater in Aurora. Fenton has since spoken and written about her sessions with the notorious murderer to advocate for threat assessment reforms in psychiatry.
But sources say the officer deferred to Dr. Fenton, asking whether she wanted to order what is known as an M1 hold on Holmes, which would have given psychiatrists up to 72 hours to assess his mental state.
Ian Huntley's accusers.
The reality is that here's a man who's very accomplished at lying, had been interviewed numerous times by the police in the past, so knew exactly the procedures.
Too many people failed to bring Ian Huntley to justice throughout the 1990s. The school custodian was charged multiple times for sexual assault and inappropriate relationships with minors. Around a dozen people reported him to the police, including a survivor who claimed he nearly killed her. But because British record-keeping treated each incident as isolated, Huntley was never thoroughly investigated.
So he was someone who was very much putting himself into a situation where he both offended against young children and offended against young adults. This is someone who used their power, who uses control, and very much uses adult influence in order to commit his offences against them.
Finally, in 2003, he was convicted of the murder of 2 children in 1999. The responsive inquiry inspired background check reforms and the Safeguarding Vulnerable Groups Act, which bars alleged abusers from working with children. Sadly, these reforms came too late to save Jessica Chapman and Holly Wells from a man who had already caused so much suffering.
But finally, the only person left believing his lies was Huntley himself, and he received a double life sentence for murder.
Nicole Childress and Sandra Smith.
Yes, because you seen the ambulance on the corner of 25th and State.
What's the problem?
Okay, it's this butt-naked young boy or man or whatever. He's fell out, and people are trying to help him stand. He can't stand. He's butt-naked. He has no clothes on. He is very hurt.
Serial killer Jeffrey Dahmer would have been stopped sooner if the authorities listened to the likes of concerned neighbor Glenda Cleveland. Her daughter Sandra Smith and niece Nicole Childress came all too close to saving Conorak's Soham phone. The Milwaukee students were home for the Memorial Day holiday when they witnessed the teenage Laotian refugee escape from Dahmer's home. After police arrived, Dahmer convinced them that his captive was his age-appropriate boyfriend.
He came out of his apartment, he was talking crazy, he's butt naked, and he doesn't know what's going on.
Soham was murdered that night. His family later received a settlement from the city, especially as Dahmer was on probation for sexually assaulting Soham's brother, Somsak. This family could have avoided further tragedy if police listened to Childress and Smith about a man they knew was dangerous.
Wait. You just gonna let him take this baby back inside?
Ma'am, he's telling me this is where they live. We're gonna take him back inside.
Y'all don't at least want to find out how old this boy is first?
Ma'am, he says it's his boyfriend.
Ben Benite, Roxanne Deschamps, and Catherine Blaine.
Forensic psychiatrist Keith Ablow.
We have to understand how losses register and how ill-equipped people without a full repertoire emotionally can be to deal with grief.
Nicholas Cruz himself foreshadowed February 14, 2018. The previous September, bail bondsman and YouTuber Ben Benite notified the FBI about the disturbing video comment, "I'm going to be a professional school shooter."
So I looked up the number for our local field office and I called and I left a message. Well, the next day I had 2 FBI agents standing in my office, taking down the information, taking copies of the screenshot.
This tip wasn't shared with the field office in Miami, where many anonymous tips about Cruz had been made. The homeless teen was later taken in by Kimberly and James Sneed, who were warned about his hostile behavior by Roxanne Deschamps and Catherine Blaine. Still, the well-meaning couple didn't take this seriously until after Cruz killed 17 people at Parkland High School. The FBI formally apologized for failing the protocols that could have prevented this, while the Sneeds expressed remorse for ever trying to help the disturbed young man.
But the day I met him, I told him, I said, you need to find somebody to talk to. I need to find you a professional to speak to. And the ball was rolling on that just days before all this happened.
Before we continue, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. You have the option to be notified for occasional videos or all of them. If you're on your phone, make sure you go into your settings and switch on notifications. Brooks, Judy, and Randy Brown.
We still can't believe it was Dylan, even though we've heard the stories in detail from the kids. We know he did it. We know he took part willingly, but we can't believe it's him.
Brooks Brown was one of Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold's few friends at the high school in Columbine, Colorado. He was also the first person to take Harris's aggression seriously over online death threats that began in 1997. In '98, Judy and Randy reported this harassment of their son to the sheriff's office, which did not follow up. On April 20th, 1999, Harris sent Brooks home from school before he and Klebold committed a massacre.
Well, I'll tell you what was odd about watching the tapes. I saw the same Dylan. His actions, his body mannerisms were exactly the same. The words were, however, more violent than I ever knew he could talk about.
The Browns would become key to investigations and activism in the wake of this historic tragedy. Brooks's memoir, No Easy Answers, is even seen as an important lesson in recognizing the warnings about dangerous people, especially the ones made by their peers.
The SWAT team from our department has been joined by at least 3 other SWAT teams from area agencies, and they are still currently working the area and the building, looking for additional victims and suspects.
What are some other tragic cases of warnings going ignored? Drop a tip in the comments.